Iranian missiles raining down on Israel this morning, injuring over 100 people in the south. This as President Trump issues an ultimatum to the regime: open the Strait of Hormuz or face total energy obliteration. And with that, we welcome you to the latest edition of Fox News Live. I'm Kevin Cork in Washington. We've got Fox team coverage coming your way in just moments. Dana Marie McNichol is near Mar-a-Lago in Florida, where, of course, the president is spending the weekend. But we begin with Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst in Tel Aviv. Trey had a chance to speak exclusively with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. Trey, good day.
Kevin, good afternoon. A lot of developments here out of the region as the Israelis are taking more incoming Iranian ballistic missile fire. And overnight, President Trump issuing a new warning to the Iranian regime. He took to Truth Social to say, in part, quote, if Iran doesn't fully open without threat the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours from this exact point in time, the United States of America will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, today at a site where an Iranian missile slammed into a residential area, injuring more than 100 people, I had an opportunity to ask Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, about this statement from President Trump.
Overnight, President Trump said that if in 48 hours the Iranians don't open the Strait of Hormuz, that there will be strikes against the power grids in Iran. Will you participate in those strikes, and what do you think should happen next in this campaign?
I think President Trump knows exactly what he's doing, and whatever we do together, and as far as possible in confidence.
The Iranians are continuing their attacks against Israel and regional Gulf countries, but it was an attempt over the weekend that drew international attention. The Diego Garcia base, that's more than 2,000 miles away from Iranian territory, came under threat from Iranian ballistic missiles, an indication the Iranians were not being upfront about the range of their medium-range ballistic missiles. And this led the Israelis to launch new strikes against the Iranian regime, going after many of the ballistic missile storage facilities. They've also, according to IDF officials, taken out 70% of their launchers, but they still have more than 150 of those launchers that they are using to target regional countries and Israel. Now, Israel's former Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, also spoke with Fox News today to describe what this missile threat looks like for European allies.
It's important that Europe now wakes up, understands that America and Israel, with the leadership of President Trump, are preventing a nuclear Iranian nightmare on all of Europe. We're fighting this war to protect them. Now the lie has been revealed. Iran has missiles that can reach Madrid, that can reach Berlin, that can reach Paris. And now they suddenly woke up and understand that they're under an Iranian threat.
Madrid, Berlin, Paris, European capitals that could come under Iranian missile threat. And this again speaks to the urgency of why Operation Epic Fury is underway. According to officials that we've talked to, they say the Iranians have the ability to launch these medium-range ballistic missiles, and they still have hundreds in their arsenal. Kevin?
Trey, let me ask you, how are things looking on the ground? You mentioned what happened in the south. I'm just curious, how are things looking where you are? How are you getting these sort of typical warnings as you might get on a phone?
It's very challenging for the Israeli people right now. There have been multiple rounds of ballistic missiles today alone. And while U.S. Central Command says the amount of missiles being launched by Iran is down by more than 90% from the early days of the conflict, that doesn't speak to the reality in terms of the stockpile that the Iranian regime still has. They have the ability to threaten U.S. troops and allies across the Middle East. And when you see the Diego Garcia base coming under fire, it's an indication that the Iranians have the ability to launch longer-range missiles, and they have been responding each and every day to attacks against their country. When the Israelis went after the South Pars gas field, the Iranians responded with strikes against Qatar's largest gas field. And we saw a similar response after reportedly their nuclear sites were hit over the weekend. And so we expect to continue to see this back and forth. And the question is the direction of the escalation ladder here in the Middle East, and whether or not the Israelis and the Americans are going to be able to find a way to neutralize this threat in short order from the Iranian regime. Kevin?
It's a complicated circumstance. Please stay safe, my friend. Trey Yingst for us today in Tel Aviv. Thanks as always. Meantime, the clock is ticking for the regime in Iran. Dana Marie McNichol has more on that 48-hour ultimatum that the president issued yesterday online. She joins us from West Palm Beach, Florida. Dana Marie, afternoon.
Hi, Kevin. That's right. The president's rhetoric is continuing to intensify on this war. His latest threat, an ultimatum on Iran. He says either reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face those powerful strikes on power plants, as we just heard Trey expand on. Now, the president posted this warning, threatening to obliterate Iran's power plants within 48 hours from this exact time point. Now, Trump posted that at 7:45 Eastern time last night, so the countdown continues to tick towards Monday night. Now, the Strait of Hormuz supplies roughly 1/5 of the world's crude oil, but has been largely limited since the conflict. Now, the president has called NATO allies cowards for not sending warships to help defend the strait. He claims because the U.S. doesn't use the strait, this should be a global effort. Now, this morning, the NATO Secretary General said countries support the U.S., but are still in the planning phase of sending help.
European allies and partners all over the world have used the last couple of weeks to make sure that we come together, that they started planning to see what we can do collectively.
Back here at home, Trump says tomorrow he will send ICE agents to help security and immigration efforts at airports across America. He's slamming Democrats for the ongoing partial government shutdown as it enters its 5th week. Now, the president says Tom Homan is in charge of the operation.
There's a lot of things that TSA does. It doesn't require like specialized training, right? Like you have exit lanes where people leave the airport. Now people try to enter those exit lanes. That's a security breach. Well, an ICE agent can maintain those exits, and that allows a TSA officer to go back to screening to move people through quicker.
Now, another way you might see ICE agents at airports starting tomorrow, Tom Homan said they can also check identification before people enters the screening area. So, of course, all eyes will be on the airport tomorrow, Kevin.
Oh, boy, here we go. Should make for a very interesting travel day. People have been calling it a flightmare. We'll see how things improve or don't. Dana Marie, thank you as always for the very latest on the airport situation. Right now, the war, of course, is really clearly top of mind, not just here in Washington, but all over the globe. And with that, we want to welcome Israeli Ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, to the program. Danny, as always, it's a pleasure to have you with us. You know, I've been watching Trey in particular with great interest discuss the coordination and the cooperation between the U.S. and Israel. It seems like it's going according to plan. Is that your sense, even now several weeks into this conflict?
Absolutely, Kevin. What we see is a joint effort of Israel and the U.S., and we are targeting many sites in Tehran, in Iran, and we are winning this war. It's important to say that. It's costly. It's not easy. We saw what happened in Israel in the last few hours, where Iranian missiles landed in neighborhoods, and unfortunately, we have casualties and a lot of things to repair there. But the bottom line is that we are winning this war. We are dismantling this war machine. It took them 47 years to build it, and within few weeks, we pushed them back, and we will continue to do that. And what we are seeing now, Kevin, that they are desperate. They are desperate. They attack neighboring countries. They're sending missiles all over, and they are exposing their lives. You know, for many years, they claim that the ballistic missiles are only for defense, and the reach of those missiles is about 1,000 miles. And what we saw recently, that those missiles can reach actually distances more than 2,000 miles, reach European cities and destinations. So they are revealing those lies, and we will continue to hammer them.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Mr. Ambassador, because when you look at the map of the reach now, especially as the Iranian regime tried to send missiles toward the base over Diego Garcia, we're talking about thousands of kilometers, far exceeding what they claimed previously. So you're right, flat out, they lied. But I think what's important here is it also puts into really sharp focus the number of European capitals that are now also within the risk distance from Iran. Let me share this. This is from Mark Rutte, NATO General Secretary. He's talking about this debate between our allies in Europe and, of course, the U.S. And again, this sort of tug of war between what they ought to be doing to assist us and what they are doing right now. Listen to this.
I know there is a lot of debate in the US and in Europe whether this campaign of the president against Iran was necessary. And let me tell you, it is. It is crucial that the president, that the US is doing this, to take out the nuclear capability and the ballistic missile capability, because this is posing a threat. It is an existential threat to Israel. It is a threat to the region. It is a threat to Europe, to the whole world. So it is really crucial that the US is doing this. And I hope that people understand that argument, even if they're doubting whether it was necessary or not.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, one would certainly make the argument that the Secretary General gets it. The better question, however, at this hour is, do you think leaders in Europe get it as well?
Unfortunately not. You know, they have to wake up. The European people should wake up and demand answers from their leaders. You know, they choose to speak with the Iranian, to ignore the reality. Those ballistic missiles can now reach Europe, period. And they will get to Europe when the Iranians will decide the time will come. The same way they attacked the Gulf countries, they can and they will attack European countries. And, you know, it's not all of them. You know, Chancellor Merz from Germany said it very clear that Israel is doing the dirty work for the entire world. And today it's not only Israel, it's Israel and the United States under the leadership of President Trump is actually making Europe safer. But they should take part of it. They should contribute to this effort. You know, by avoiding reality, it's not going to help them.
You know what? I'm glad you mentioned it, too, because we're talking about 47 years going all the way back to 1979. People act as if this is some sort of a new threat. We've been watching it play out in real time for decades. Let me share a little bit of sound here before we wrap up the segment. This is Ambassador Mike Waltz, of course, U.S. Ambassador to the UN. And everyone seemed to agree initially that, no, maybe Iran should not have nuclear weapons. But now that the action is finally taking place to eliminate that threat, for some strange reason, a lot of folks in Europe, at least the leadership in that continent, seem to sort of want to sit back and let other people do the heavy lifting. Listen to this. Get your thoughts to wrap us up.
As a UN ambassador, I've cited to the Security Council the 2 decades of Security Council resolutions that countries have voted for around the world to ensure Iran doesn't have a nuke. But President Trump isn't just going to send strongly worded letters. When it became clear they were not negotiating in good faith, after he gave diplomacy a chance on multiple occasions, he's taking decisive action.
He nailed it at the end there, Ambassador, taking decisive action. Wrap us up, 15 seconds or so. This is what has to happen to make for a safer world. Your thoughts?
Ambassador Waltz is absolutely right. There was time for dialogue and diplomacy. It failed. Now it's time for action. And that's exactly what President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are doing. They're taking action against the regime. And the European leaders, they should be ashamed for their silence, incompetence. They must know and do better than that.
A lot of Americans feel very strongly that they don't want war. They don't want to be involved. The administration feels even more strongly that it's high time that they make the world safer, and that means removing the threat. Ambassador Danny Danon, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you. Meantime, developing story for you at this hour. Airport security lines and delays surging at major airports nationwide as the spring break Russian government shutdown are giving millions of travelers major, and I mean major problems. And now President Trump says he's sending ICE agents to airports starting tomorrow. Correspondent Madison Scarpino live at our nation's busiest airport, Hartsfield Jackson. Seems like you should set up a cot there. Every time I see you, you are there.
I would definitely recommend that for anyone traveling through this airport today, as well as snacks. But yeah, you said it. These TSA workers not getting paid is leading to a lot of chaos at major airports nationwide, especially here in Atlanta, as these TSA offers continue to get $0 paychecks. And, you know, the lines here have been wrapped around the first floor of this airport since about 5:30 this morning. People are waiting for hours. So I want to give our viewers a taste of what's going on. I met this passenger, Ryan. Ryan, you've been in line for about 2 hours now. What's it like?
It's not too bad. People seem to be in good spirits. I think we all understand, we can get through this together.
Yeah. I will say, I mean, everyone seems to be kind of in good spirits, thinking positive. Have you seen any stressful passengers so far?
No, just no. Only the family, maybe, but...
Yes, that is very hectic for sure. People seem to be coming prepared, Kevin, and I do want to have my photographer, Dan, give our viewers a closer look at these lines right now. But Ryan, of course, this is all happening because Congress cannot come to an agreement to fund the Department of Homeland Security, so these TSA workers still getting $0. Some calling out, some still showing up to work. What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, it's disappointing. I mean, the American people, we're all good-hearted people, and to be used as a political football can be very, disappointing.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for your time. Hopefully things get better soon, Kevin. But again, things are not slowing down or picking up, I should say, here at the Atlanta airport. And as you mentioned at the top, President Trump is saying that he's going to start bringing in ICE agents to help out these TSA officers. Back to you.
Great job, as always, Madison Scarpino for us at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson, busiest airport in the world. Thank you. So with President Trump promising more agents, ICE agents in this particular case, at airports tomorrow, the question is, will it all work? Reaction from Florida Congressman Byron Donalds. He joins us next. President Trump issuing a stark warning to Iran and threatening major strikes if the regime doesn't reopen the Strait of Hormuz in the next couple of days. Now, that warning comes as Iran targeted a remote U.S. military base on an island called Diego Garcia. Chief International Correspondent Steve Harrigan live in Armenia near the border with Iran with the latest there. Steve.
Kevin, President Trump issuing a dramatic warning to Iran with a timeline, giving Iran 48 hours to open up that key Strait of Hormuz, or else its power plants, he said, would be obliterated, with the largest one starting first. Now, Iran has responded to that threat with a threat of its own, of retaliation against U.S. assets in the region. Here's Iran's response.
If Iran's fuel and energy infrastructure is targeted by the enemy, all energy, information technology, and desalination infrastructure belonging to America and the regime in the region will be targeted.
And as you mentioned, Iran targeted U.S. and U.K. military positions on the island of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. Now, that's more than 2,000 miles away from Tehran. One of those missiles failed. One was shot down by a U.S. ship, but I think the range surprised a lot of people. That 2,000-mile distance would mean theoretically about 1/3 of Europe would be in range from Tehran with a similar missile. Kevin, back to you.
Certainly changes the stakes in everyone's perspective. Steve, thank you as always, our chief international correspondent.
That are some are just have notified management, hey, I can no longer come to work because I don't have money for gas or childcare. And in addition to that, a lot of people, if they can't come to work, it seems like management is not being very flexible in the fact that they can't come to work. So it puts them in a really tough bind.
Frustrations mounting for TSA agents across the country as the Democrat-led DHS shutdown enters day 37 after the Senate rejected funding on Saturday for a 5th time, leaving millions of flyers stranded in TSA's long lines for hours and hours and hours. Meantime, President Trump announcing via Truth Social that he is now going to send ICE agents to airports across the country to help TSA beginning tomorrow. Let's bring in Florida Congressman Byron Donalds, who is running for governor of the great state of Florida. Great to have you with us as always. I want to share a little sound as we begin the segment. This is Tom Holman again explaining what ICE agents might be able to do to help break the jam, a bit of a log jam of personnel and, frankly, travelers. Listen to this.
You have exit lanes where people leave the airport. Now people try to enter those exit lanes. That's a security breach. Well, an ICE agent can maintain those exits, and that allows a TSA officer to go back to screening to move people through quicker. ICE can check identification before people enter the screening area, right? And we're trying to release TSA resources to get to positions that they really need expertise in, like the X-ray screening.
Now, that's certainly one perspective, and one would know that you would want to trust a guy like Tom Homan to give it to you straight. But there are some TSA agents that are kind of pushing back on their particular preparation to actually make a difference. Let me share this and get your thoughts on both at the same time there, Byron. This is Johnny Jones. He says, not so fast, my friends. Listen.
TSA officers, you know, the training system, it takes about 5 to 6 months to become a certified officer. I couldn't imagine what functions are going to do other than, you know, just kind of stand outside of the checkpoint or maybe sit on the exit lane. It could cause a distraction to the officers working, you know, because I don't know what kind of interaction this is going to cause.
All right, so on the one hand, Tom Homan says, listen, they're going to be there to help. They're going to help get people in and out more quickly, more efficiently, and offer support to our very strong TSA agents who, frankly, need to get paid. We'll talk about that as well. On the other hand, you have some agents saying, I'm not sure how this is going to help. Your thoughts?
Well, first, let's talk about the details. I think Tom Homan does understand that if you have them guarding exit lanes, I think that's something that definitely ICE agents can do and probably help with some of these core functions. The second thing, let's take a step back from the particulars. The reason why the president can send ICE agents in potentially starting Monday is because Congress, through one big beautiful bill, funded ICE for the next 2 years through budget reconciliation. So the Democrats have shut down Homeland Security. They have long lines in Atlanta, in Houston, in LaGuardia, in JFK, many airports around the country, because the Democrats want to defund ICE, which is already funded. This is the stupidest thing going on in America, and it's purely because the Democrats are trying to play tough. They're trying to play political games while Americans are frustrated. They should just simply do the right thing. Quite frankly, they should not follow Chuck Schumer. They should follow John Fetterman, who is voted to actually to refund Homeland. The Democrats in the Senate should follow John Fetterman instead of Chuck Schumer. They should refund the Department of Homeland Security so this insanity can come to an end. They're trying to be tough on ICE, but here's the facts, America. ICE is already funded. That's number one. Number two, now the American people are being largely inconvenienced because of terrible Democrat politics. And TSA is what we're talking about. But it's also the Coast Guard. It's also border agents. It's also customs enforcement. This is leaving the homeland unsecure. This is nuts. This makes no sense. You cannot trust the Democrats with power because this is the idiocy that they do.
I'm glad you mentioned the Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman. He has been quite vocal as the lone voice on his side of the aisle, echoing what you've said. Listen, we're talking about real families, Byron, people, congressmen who they're not prepared to miss a paycheck or two or three or several. This hits home, and it gets beyond the sort of policy prescriptions in Washington. You're hurting real American people. Fetterman said this on X, end this ridiculous DHS shutdown now, and I couldn't agree more with that. Let me share this. This is, I want to shift gears because we're a little limited on time. I want to get you on the record on the Save America Act. We've been talking ad nauseum about let's get this thing done. It doesn't seem to be much of a debate, 80-20 issue. Most Americans feel like having an ID to vote is not a big, heavy lift. Here's Mike Lee talking about the importance of doing whatever it takes to get that to the president's desk. Listen to this.
All you have to do right now, if you're a non-citizen, legal or not legal, go into a DMV in almost any state, fill out a driver's license application form, and then check a box and sign your name saying that you are certified to, you are legally allowed to vote in the United States, and all of a sudden you are a registered voter. The blue states across America refuse to provide information to the Department of Homeland Security, charged with reviewing these voter registration files to make sure there are no non-citizens. That's one of the gaps the Save America Act would close.
That's what you want to do, close those gaps, because you want fair and honest elections. Congressman.
Mike Lee is 100% correct on this. And once again, look at this issue. Everybody in the country agrees with voter ID and making sure that Americans, and only Americans, are voting in our elections. That's common sense. The only group of people who disagree with that are Democrats who are elected in this country. Because the truth is, they want our election systems open to fraud and abuse. They don't want to secure the ballots. And who really is disenfranchised is the American voter. Because it makes no sense in the most advanced country in the world, the best economy in the world, that you got states like California that take 3 weeks to count ballots. I mean, this is just pure stupidity. But once again, this is what the Democrats bring to us, folks. This is a very simple issue. It should pass very easily. The only people who oppose it are elected Democrats. I wonder why.
And I wonder why. The $64,000 question. Congressman Byron Donalds, a real pleasure. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Continuing our coverage of the war in Iran, President Trump has an ultimatum. He's telling the regime, back off, open the Strait of Hormuz or else. Meantime, in Cuba, the president's efforts to isolate the communist island's leaders could be working. We're going to talk about that as Fox News Live continues after a very quick time. Cuba's medical presence across the Caribbean is dwindling as allies across the Caribbean are unwinding decades of medical cooperation agreements with Havana. Now, this comes as the Cuban government is refusing to negotiate with the Trump administration, at least for now. My next guest says Cuba's medical diplomacy is already unraveling as it's ending long-standing doctor agreements with Jamaica and Guyana. Joining me now is Richard Fowler, a Fox News contributor. I love this story that you wrote. I read it over in Forbes, and it's a fascinating one for those of us who are familiar. I lived in Miami. You lived in Miami, grew up in South Florida. So you understand perhaps more than most the importance of this relationship between what happens in terms of medical training in Cuba and throughout the Caribbean.
Yeah, and I think there's a larger point here when we think about how America's policy towards Cuba is shifting in this moment. This isn't just about Cuba, it's about the consequences of what will come next if we see a shift in the Cuban regime, if we see what the president is sort of saying, a collapse in the Cuban regime. One, Cuba doesn't live in a vacuum. Cuba is part of a larger neighborhood where the United States is a member of said neighborhood, right? And so when the president says that he will have the honor of taking Cuba, it's a very powerful statement, but it's also a statement that should cause pause because we have to ask the question of what happens next in a world in which America decides that there's going to be regime change in Cuba. Does that lead to breaking down in that region? Does that lead to a migration crisis here in the United States? Every time there's been an escalated crisis in modern times between Cuba and the United States, we've seen the Cuban government do one thing. They're very famous for doing it, opening up their borders and letting the people who live in that country free. More likely than not, they're going to end up in Florida, where they always end up. We saw that in the Mariel boat lift in 1980, also in the Bolsero crisis in 1994, where we saw thousands, hundreds of thousands of Cubans leave to come to here to the United States. I think what makes this problem more complicated is for a long time, the United States has benefited from a stable Caribbean. It's one of the reasons why we've seen narcotics trafficking coming from the Caribbean go down to almost zero because of a stable Caribbean governments. The United States had the ability to work with them. Part of what makes those countries stable is a secure healthcare system. People don't like to talk about this part, but one of the reasons why there's a secure healthcare system in Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, St. Lucia has a lot to do with Cuba's medical diplomacy program. And the State Department has had some issues around whether they're paying these doctors or they're not paying these doctors, and we can debate that. But the impact that these healthcare professionals have had in these Caribbean countries has been remarkable in sustaining their healthcare system. And this happens at a moment, while this story is so interconnected, it happens at a moment that America, who's dealing with a healthcare shortage right here on our shores, has depended on Jamaican nurses, Trinidadian nurses, Bahamian nurses coming to the United States to deal with our healthcare crisis. This is a very complicated story where you can't look at Cuba in a vacuum, moral of the story.
I think you nailed it when you say they're an important part of an actual community. They're part of a neighborhood down there, and I think sometimes the foreign policy argument gets lost in Washington. It's not as if this is just one country that we're dealing with. We're dealing with what happens in Cuba can have a spillover effect, as you said, in Jamaica, Guyana, and all throughout the Caribbean. Let me share this. This is the foreign minister of Cuba. Despite the headlines, he suggested the country is not in collapse. Listen to this.
It is not in a state of collapse. We're being as creative as possible. We're mustering all our creativity, our ingenuity, to try to find ways in which we can cope with the reality that we did not choose, of which we are not responsible, and that would help our people go through this with the least pain possible. But pain is there, have no doubt.
Pain is there, and I think it's fair to say that, especially when you unpack your article in Forbes, it's a more complicated circumstance than just what's happening right now. This could have generational and region-wide impact.
That's absolutely right. I think you have to go backward to go forwards. He's right that the pain is clear. For a long time, Cuba's depended on some sort of godfather to help them deal with energy. Correct. For a long time, it was the Soviets. Now, then it became the Venezuelans.
That's right.
Now there's nobody. Part of the reason being is that the Trump administration has been very hard on the region and saying we will put tariffs on anybody that decides to trade with Cuba. This has created instability in Cuba, resulted in them ending their medical diplomacy program in Jamaica, ending their medical diplomacy program in Guyana because of American pressure. And so now the question becomes, in a world in which Cuba is destabilized, what impact does it have for all of its neighbors, including one of its closest neighbors, the United States, which is just 90 miles away?
I'm imagining that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has a very strong opinion about this, and he wants to see the island succeed, but he wants to see it succeed in a way that's more sustainable. Always terrific to have you. I love just talking with you. Richard Fowler, our great Fox News contributor. Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. President Trump, meantime, taking Harvard University to court, alleging the school failed to protect Jewish and Israeli students. We're going to talk about that. And also coming up, the family of 18-year-old Sheridan Gorman is speaking out for the first time since the Loyola Chicago freshman was shot and killed early Thursday. That statement, no parent. Developing story at this hour, the parents of 18-year-old Sheridan Gorman demanding accountability for their daughter's killing. Cops in Chicago say a gunman fired on the young college student as she was simply walking with her friends near campus late Thursday, early Thursday morning. CB Cotton live in New York City with the very latest on this story for us. CB.
Hey, Kevin. So amid swirling reports about who was in custody for the killing of Sheridan Gorman, the 18-year-old's family is speaking out once again to reveal more details. The lengthy statement reads in part, quote, as the case moves forward toward arraignment, the family has been informed that the suspect is a Venezuelan national and additional information is expected to be released. We are again faced with the unbearable truth. Our daughter's life was taken and our family will never be the same. This was not inevitable. This was a choice, and our daughter paid the price for it. For now, Chicago police are only saying that a person of interest is still being questioned. The Chicago Tribune says it's obtained police records which indicate witnesses reported a man dressed in all black with a black face mask pointed a gun and fired a round as Gorman tried to run away. The outlet says the suspect was spotted just minutes after the shooting on surveillance cameras without a face mask, walking with a distinct limp. The shooting happened at around 1:30 a.m. on Thursday at Toby Prince Beach, just minutes from the Loyola University College campus. Loved ones have said Gorman was there with friends trying to watch the Northern Lights. While no motive has been revealed and campus leaders have said there's no ongoing threat, people are still understandably shaken and demanding answers.
This is unfathomable to think that you're sending your child to college. Sheridan cannot be a statistic. She is somebody's entire world, and the mayor and the governor owe her real answers.
The family has said public and private services to honor Gorman's life are planned for this coming week in New York, where she was from. She was just months away from finishing her freshman year in Chicago. Kevin.
Absolutely infuriating story. CB Cotton, thank you for that. We appreciate that. Meantime, Harvard University heading back to court in a new federal lawsuit from the Trump administration. This one filed on Friday. The Ivy League school is accused of failing to protect Jewish students from harassment during protests. And we're talking about billions of dollars in funding at stake. We want to bring in Kenneth Marcus, Louis Brandeis Center for Human Rights Chairman and former Education Secretary for Civil Rights, the Assistant Secretary. Great to have you with us. This is a story that I think a lot of people have felt very strongly about for quite some time, most notably because you have an obligation as a university to protect all of your students. You can't simply turn a blind eye and let protests prevent them from getting their education.
Absolutely. Good to be with you. You know, at the Brandeis Center, we have sued colleges to hold them accountable when they tolerate anti-Semitic environment for their Jewish students. But it's one thing for private organizations to do it and something completely different when it's the U.S. Department of Justice. This is unprecedented. We've not seen any prior administration do anything like this. But the fact is, without forceful action, colleges aren't going to change.
Let me get your reaction while we have you. This is a statement from the university. It's somewhat lengthy, but I think it's important, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Their statement says, Harvard's efforts demonstrate the very opposite of deliberate indifference. We will continue to prioritize this important work and will defend the university against this lawsuit, which represents yet another pretextual and retaliatory action by the administration for refusing to turn over control of Harvard to the federal government. A very strong statement indeed, and full disclosure, I'm a graduate of that university. What do you make of what the school is saying about that?
It makes sense. What would you expect them to say? Obviously,
Right.
They want to change the subject to make it not about themselves, but about Donald Trump. He is an unpopular figure in Massachusetts and within the Ivy League. So to the extent that they can make this issue about him rather than about them, that's better for them. But what would be best for their students is if they really focused on the problems at Harvard and throughout higher education and really made it change instead of blaming this administration.
Got to make them pay if they were not providing safe and secure learning environments for all of their students. That's the argument that's being made here. Let me share this very quickly, a little sound from America Reports. It's going to take you back to July, but I think it's an important one. This is actually from a Harvard alumnus. Listen to this.
We've had Jewish students being told by their professors to leave the class because their Israeli nationality made others uncomfortable. We've had a Jewish student being spat on. Another was told Heil Hitler. A staff member challenged me to debate him as to whether Jews orchestrated 9/11. If this was any other minority group, the left would be demanding that we withhold their funds. But because it's the Trump administration, all of a sudden it's controversial.
Well, that's a powerful, powerful statement made there by that alum. Let me give you the last 20, 30 seconds to wrap us up there, Kenneth.
So I think we should say that that alumnus was our former client, Shabbos Kestenbaum. We're very proud of him. What we would like to see is not excuses, but change. Colleges need to know that if they tolerate anti-Semitic harassment or harassment of anyone, they're going to pay for it. We at the Brandeis Center will hold them accountable. And more than that, they'll be hearing from the Justice Department.
Former Assistant Education Secretary for Civil Rights, Kenneth Marcus, thank you for your time today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. To Hawaii now, where folks are being forced to evacuate after historic flooding drenches many parts of the islands. More devastating images when we come back. This is Fox News Live. Don't go away.